Jai Guru, everyone.
Hey, Guru.
How are you doing, Mike?
I'm very well today. It's like really hot here in Austria, but they said it's going to start raining in half an hour. So I'm looking forward to that.
How are you doing, Chris? Don't talk about the weather. Don't talk about the weather.
This is the week by week weather podcast.
It is. But usually we hear about Ireland.
Ireland.
People wanted to hear about Austria. That's why I brought it up.
It was an interesting day today weather-wise. It poured very heavily and the skies opened up and it was very sunny. On a more amusing note, I have a stray cat that I introduced you guys to. And he's sleeping very sweetly by my side these days after a little vet checkup, and we've given her a new home. So I'm good. I've got company, happy. What's the complaint about? Nothing.
Very nice, very nice. So let's crack on, shall we? The minute today we're going to talk about minute 18 of the film Awake, the Life of Yogananda. And this minute, I'll summarize, is really about science, really, and the subtle relationship between science and religion and God and all those good things, which few scientists appreciate, I suppose, but more and more so these days than previously. What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, I love this concept that Yogananda keeps stressing this, like, his teaching is a science, not a dogma. We said it in the previous minutes. And science means, like Varun Soni says, it means you try it out. If it works, then it's proven. And if it doesn't work, then you move on to something else. And that is something that was fundamentally missing when I was learning about religion as a child. And that is what I love about the teachings of Yogananda.
Nice. So the first, Chris, I'll let you come in. The first scene is this Indian-looking man, and he's in a white background, and he says something along the lines that of seeing God as energy or some form of energy, and he's kind of like affirming to the audience that that's fine, you can see God as energy. But do you think that seeing God in an energy form is compatible with world religions?
Well, I suppose it has to be, doesn't it? If you're trying to look at the fundamental definition of the word, energy, like we are all forms of energy. So, even to those hardened people that might think that God is the physical human, somewhere in existence, he's made up of energy. So, I would argue that you couldn't argue against that to too much of a degree, but it's definitely given a new spin on how we conceptualize God, which in previous minutes has been discussed. And I think it's definitely a stepping stone towards a higher knowing and a higher understanding of what creation is and God is. And yeah, to Yogananda's credit, he's really coming in and being a trailblazer to help us understand that in the Western world.
Let's take a religion. Let's take a religion.
This is the dangerous territory, Priya.
Yeah,
where are you going with this?
Which one are you choosing, Priya?
let's take one that's quite a universal one, I suppose. That a lot of
so
people.
Catholic Christianity. Then.
No. Let's take Buddhism. Let's take Buddhism. So in Buddhism, right? So many people around the world consider themselves Buddhists or are in line with, mindfulness. That word. That's the popular word, the buzzword these days. So let's take mindfulness as a concept, and let's relate that to this energy personification of God. Do you think that works, Mike?
Yes, of course, because I feel like this whole energy concept is not really a problem with Eastern religions. If you think about Hinduism, Buddhism, you tell them about energy and they say, yes, perfect. That's kind of how our religion works anyways. I feel like it's mostly a problem in the West to marry those two up. Like you mentioned that Buddhism in the context of universality. And I feel like that's also something that makes Buddhism attractive. I feel like Buddhism is like a religion that is chosen by people in the West as well. I think Austria has like 4 or 5% Buddhists, and a lot of them are actually people who are Austrians that didn't think the Catholic Church was for them, and then they were looking around and found Buddhism. They found this concept. There's no God. There's just this higher energy, this higher being that you worship, right? And that is something that they like, probably because they were a bit burned by the Christian idea of hell and this God that is vengeful and stuff like that. And they kind of like this and those Eastern concepts. They resonate with those people, and there's very little in those teachings that people find offensive or repulsive. So that's what makes it, I think, universal and totally compatible with this energy thing. So people who are into spirituality, I can see why they would also find Buddhism appealing.
The obviously not all Buddhists aspire to a supreme deity or any form of God, really. They just think about their own personal transformation and leave that to the afterlife or whatever. Chris, let's take a different example. Let's take a different religion, a less mainstream one. Let's take paganism. So if we think about pagans, do you think they would ascribe to this form of God as energy?
Well, I don't really know if paganism is not mainstream, given that we have worship on the Sunday, typically, and then lots of mixes of paganism and Christianity. Sorry, the question was:
would pagans consider the conception of God as energy something that they could resonate with?
Yeah, I mean, the pagans would have worshipped the sun, would have worshipped the wind and more Mother Nature, right? And if that isn't energy in a sense, then I don't know what is. But I think the idea of energy, and this is, I think, a bingo. I've got a yoga reference. Try to go for one every podcast. These ideas of energy, I guess, have really more been understood in the last 100 plus years. So, we can't. I would suggest not look too much with a critical or critical eye to religions that have gone in the past, because I think quite simply there hasn't really been the capability to fully grasp the grander understanding of God, simply because of our space and time reference in the yogas. But whether it's any religion, paganism or Hinduism, I think it's all being lost somewhere further down the line. But what I do like about Hinduism and other elements of Christianity is that there's so many stories based in analogy and metaphor that have been taken literally because of what I've just mentioned. But I heard Shiva, the story of Shiva and how the wife, forgive me, I don't know the names, Parvati danced around Shiva and kind of woke him up. These are more analogies for the interactions of energy. So I think really, just to share a story, but when I was dating a girl maybe 6-7 years ago, we were having dinner.
Whoa! Isn't Barbara in the room?
Yeah. She's not going to watch this reference about an ex. But we were talking about the subject of religion and things like this, and I don't know why it just kind of blurted out. I said that one day science will catch up with religion, or vice versa, and they'll come full circle and connect and find commonality. And I really truly believe that it's just a matter of time before they actually. It looks like there's polarization happening, but it's really coming in some sort of full circle, in my opinion. But yeah, that's quite long-winded.
Let's go to the next scene now. Now we have also in this minute Varun Soni sitting in his chapel, I believe, probably in USC, but we don't know where he is. But he says something along the lines of science, as Michael said at the start of the podcast, being a empirical process. You know, you try it out and you see if it works. And religion, Yogananda's religion definition being a scientific process where you try it and you see what works and what doesn't work for you. So I wanted to discuss that concept really. For example, I have dabbled in this because, as you know, I'm of a technical background. So when Varun Soni was asked when he was on the show, on the podcast, remember I asked him how would you test, how would you get some actual data for some of your research. So he's doing research in the field of the impact of meditation and other spiritual elements of life. And I asked him, and he kind of inferred that he relied a lot on self-reporting. And that didn't really satisfy my heart, because I know, for example, that the disbelievers, as we discussed with Professor Clooney, the disbelievers find it hard to take things like that on board, don't they? They like to have data, they like to have proof, evidence, numbers that are objective, not subjective. And so personally, I've taken this on board myself. So, for example, we have our smart watches which take our pulse rates, and so I took my first smartwatch when I got one from work, and when we were doing lots of analytics work for different reasons. But I took it home and I started leaving it on during meditation, and I wanted to see during my a 90-minute period of meditation what happens to my heart rate and what happens to my oxygen levels and things like that. And I found that, and I shared this with you guys, I think, on our WhatsApp, our young adults WhatsApp group. And I segmented my different practices. And then, for example, we start with the counting, the 20-20 breathing, and then we do the Hong So, then we do the Om technique, then we do the Kriya techniques. So I proportioned all of those out in the time frames, and you would have seen that when I changed the technique, there was a slight change in my heart rate, and then it kind of went down. And it kept following, the heart rate kind of kept following a trend of going downwards. And this is the kind of data that I'm personally very, very interested in. Have you guys ever thought about dabbling, or have you ever seen anything along those lines, Mike?
I have checked my pulse. I also have a smartwatch that checks the pulse, and I've checked my pulse during meditation. And I'm someone who has low blood pressure anyways, so but I'm not sure. I mean, the pulse is an interesting indicator, but it's a very gross indicator in my opinion. And I feel like the thing that you really change by meditation is often the state of your mind, and the state of your mind is such a powerful thing. When you read in Master's writing that being happy heals the body, being happy sends good energy to all your friends, and it's like being sad does all the reverse, right? So it's like when you have the ability to take your mind from a sad state to a happy state, it's incredibly powerful, right? The problem is right now for like data scientists and techie people, it's really hard to measure this. It's like Varun Soni said, it's self-reported how happy or sad you are. Maybe this will change. Maybe in the future you will look at someone's I don't know, aura field or something, and you can see, oh, this guy's really jolly right now. This guy looks a bit sad. Or and some people you can tell it from their face, but not everybody. Some people have this poker face where you cannot say if they're happy or sad right now. But I feel like this is the thing you can do, because you can probably lower the heart rate up to a certain extent with like breathing exercises as well, I think. And if you look at people who do deep sea diving, and they can get to incredibly low heart rates. obviously you cannot go to samadhi state. That is like for the
Zero.
deep meditators. Yeah, but I maybe the time where you can actually scientifically check on this it has started, but I wish there would be ways to measure this in a more how do you say that, precise manner. But yeah, I applaud the attempt to doing that. Absolutely.
Christoph.
I've read a few books that really made me see that there is progress going on. And one of the books that made me really change my thinking towards being vegetarian before I even got on yoga was a book written by a guy who was inheriting a whole industry in the agricultural farming world, and it was a multi-billion-dollar company. And he talked about the new American diet, I think the book's called, and he talked about all the science behind what it actually does to the body, and the studies in there on the mind and things like this, on your emotional states when you're eating animals, and the torture that animals go through. So even things like this, yoga, in my opinion, as I suppose we learn, is more than just about meditation. It's about how you live, and everything is so subtle. And to what Mike was saying there, certainly in the mainstream, we don't necessarily have the technology widely available to be, measuring everything that what we could measure. But there are a couple of interesting books out there that I have read on this subject, more scientific studies. One's called Vibrational Medicine by Richard Gerber. He's a medical doctor. And the other one is more widely known, Joe Dispenza. And the book is How to Become Supernatural. And for anybody who's keen to kind of find out what some of the more mainstream ideas are floating, those books I've read, I could recommend. They're super interesting. They study before and after meditations that supposedly have machinery that can actually check the energy position of chakras, and all sorts of really, really cool, interesting things that can look at your aura and things like this. So yeah, we're definitely breaking new ground. It's really exciting. The next 100 years are going to be, amazing in that respect, and will change the minds of many hardened, people who are anti-meditation and anti this and yoga. So I can't wait for more studies to come out.
Mm-hmm. So if we go away from just meditation, but even in meditation, for example, I think there's an autobiography of yogi passage where in the footnotes they talk about neurological pathways in the brain and the synapses and things like that, and they compared like people that don't meditate to people that do meditate, and how those pathways open up over time. And it was like very much exponential increase in the meditators in the research group. So that was quite interesting, I thought. So that's something that's objective and empirical, isn't it? The other thing, let's talk about sadhana, which in general, so our practices, our spiritual practices. So let's think about, for example, the impact of fasting. I mean, people have done fasting for thousands of years, haven't they? And nowadays we've doing a lot of scientific research on fasting and the impact of fasting. And I think in 2016, was it Yoshinori Osumi, from a Japanese scientist? He won the Nobel Prize for his research on fasting and how cells recycle and renew their content in a process called autophagy, where aging processes are slowed down and cell renewal is increased, and also stem cells are generated through the process. So that's really interesting to me, because as you guys probably know, I think we probably discussed it, I fast quite frequently fasting today, actually. So once a week I fast, a complete fast, and through 5 days a month I do a raw food fast, similar to what Yogananda describes or recommends that we do. You know, give your body a break and all that good stuff. So yeah, that's fasting. Do you guys have much experience of that, Chris?
Yeah, on a, just to hit you back, that's why you look so young, Priyank. You're so youthful. Your
On that
cells have been
point,
replenished.
last week I was fasting and I had to go to the doctor. No, I was doing my 5-day. No, I was doing a long period of fasting, and I went to the doctor the next morning of my fast, and I hadn't had any. I just had a glass of water that morning because I'd just broken my fast. And the doctor, for some reason, the GP wanted to do my urine test, and I was like, all right, fine. And so I did it, and then I said, before you do your litmus test and stuff, know that I was fasting yesterday, so the results are going to be completely skewed. And she's like, yeah, don't worry about it. And then she did the test, and then she started panicking. She's like, what is you're completely dehydrated? How are you standing right now? Your ketones are like this, to have something to eat. And I was like, no, listen, the results are completely invalid. I've been fasting the whole of yesterday. But she was like, but you're not fasting now. I was like, no, but the whole of yesterday I was fasting. And she just did not get the concept. And you'd think with this research that's going on in medicine, they'd be much more familiar with the impact of this. But yeah, anyway, sorry, Chris, I interrupted you.
Yeah, I like the tangent because there's so many different sources of information, and we have to really be true to our own hearts and minds, that what really sounds right to us. And Yogananda, he does prescribe a routine of once a week to fast, and once a month approximately to 3 days, and drink orange juice. And I love that part because it's the vitamin C that helps replenish the cells and grows new cells. So he really was on top of his game, ahead of his game when it came to fasting. So I take my advice and spiritual guidance from him, and kind of try to put aside what a lot of other, let's say, general practitioners might suggest in the Western world. Especially my mum, she would not want me fasting any more than what I do. I first recommended to my fiance, I hope she doesn't mind me talking about this, I'm sure she will, to fast, and the initial reaction was, what? I can't fast, like, no way. Now she really fasts with me and gets involved, and it makes me think of the initial resilience, let's say, that our minds and habits have towards fasting. Some people could be outraged with the idea, because we have to eat 3 square meals a day, and this is the habit that we're in. So fasting is really, for me, an experience that I enjoy. My body can really go through a purification process, and I think I even said to you guys before, like, is this normal? Like, my heart rate can change, and all these kind of things happen. I always feel so much better for doing it. But I think for a lot of people, this is probably one of the answers to their health problems, and we have a pandemic really in health issues at the moment with obesity and so on. And it would be great for more health and peace to come to the bodies and the minds. So sorry, I don't know if I answered your question there.
You did.
And just ranted a little bit.
You did.
Yeah.
Michele, would you like some contribution?
Sure. I remember fondly living with you and your wife Priyank for a few weeks, and I really liked the raw food breakfast. Fantastic. That was actually something that I kept as a habit for quite a long time. I must say now in Vienna it's difficult not to sometimes eat a croissant. But I really like that. I do the 1-day fasts, but not on a weekly basis, maybe once a month. And I loved it's like good for the body, but it's also something, it strengthens your willpower, right? It's like you go like, I fast today, your body says no, and you say no, we're doing this, and then it happens, right? And I used to have trouble fasting because I used to be a complete addict of coffee, and I completely stopped, almost stopped drinking coffee, at least coffee with caffeine, and that made it so much easier. Like I remember fasting, not having my coffee, getting a headache, and that was always annoying. And yeah, you feel so good afterwards. The next day, your body is so happy. Your body feels like it's. You would think, oh, you like according to traditional medicine, you would say like you did not eat, you must feel weak, you feel bad. But I wake up in the morning after a fast, I have more energy than ever, and I feel like my body is like using this energy to like repair things, do good things that it otherwise wouldn't have the energy to do. So because I feel like our digestive system, it takes a whole lot of energy. Every time we eat, we draw on our body's energy. And if we give him a break for a day, we give him so much time and energy to work on itself. So that's fantastic.
Can I ask a question, Priyank, mainly directed at you? In India, is it a it's not a hospital, it's not a hospital fast. In India, is it I guess common for people to fast, and is this part of the culture in Indian tradition? And is it taught in schools? Like, is it different? What's the difference in the Western world?
Very much part of the culture. So you probably know that Hindus, I should say, follow the lunar calendar, and on the lunar calendar, based on the position of the moon and the various planets, every 14 days you have to do a fast, and the fast is different for different types of people. So we talked about just now, Yogananda advising have orange juice and ground nuts for those people that need that kind of thing. Other people have absolutely nothing. Some people would have just water, other people would have just one meal in the evening, and then there's this whole group of people, and the Sanskrit word was falahari, and then over time that's become Ferrari over the last few hundred years. And then there's this whole genre of food where you can have that during fast, and what it basically means is you can't have grains. So you can have different other things like that aren't grains, but that food is actually really, really tasty. And then
like a low carb diet,
something like that. But then that food is really tasty, and then it's sometimes it's fried and things like that. So it's like, then it becomes this, like, people look forward to this day because you get this food that you don't normally get, and then you like pig out, and you're really going away from the purpose of the fast, and so it's like degraded over time. But in the purest, the pure sense, it's still very much part of the culture, and it's active to different degrees in different households and to people at different stages of their life, as I've just mentioned.
The story of the Buddha is one that when I think about fasting, I think about the Buddha, and yeah, correct me on the details here, but he was a very keen faster, and I think there was a certain name for this type of individual back in the day that would go without eating, then people would feed him, so he wouldn't actually do any preparation for cooking himself, and people would see him and his entourage walking through a town on a spiritual endeavor, and they would come up and give them food. And that used to be the way it was. Really, when Buddha became enlightened, I think the first words that he said was something like, let's eat, because he had been so long in suffering, without food, and he realized when he became enlightened, like there's no need to suffer in that way, which I thought was really cool. So that's my attitude. I'll fast, then after I'll be like, let's eat.
Sri Yukteswara said, he advises in the autobiography, like of people that do extreme fasting, where he said, or throw the dog a bone, or throw the body some food. You don't need to be so harsh with it. It's important, but you don't need to make it make it a religion, as it were. Yes. So yeah, let's go to the next scene now. So the next scene is a fantastic scientist by the name of Dr. Anita Goel. So she's on the stage, and she's essentially she's in her office, and she's talking about the link between individual consciousness and cosmic consciousness, and the merging of the two in states of meditation and other spiritual practices. And she's, we've done some research. I'll play you a video of her. She's an absolutely fascinating person. But before we get into that, let's analyze her what's in her room. So in her room, there's like some molecule, looks like DNA, and on her screen it says, probing a single molecular dynamics of the DNA polymerase motion. You obviously probably don't, Chris, you haven't seen that bit, but try and guess what that means. Go on, Chris. Probing a single molecular dynamics of the DNA polymerase motion.
Complete hospital pass. Yeah.
This is probably the worst hospital pass that we've ever done.
I'll have a stab at it. Is it the movement of the DNA strands, the way it coils over and then?
Getting close.
Something like that.
Getting close. We'll discuss what it means in a second. But yeah, there's another poster which says on the right. It's got like a banner poster which says, "Where little things make a big difference." We can.
That kind of makes sense, because above that is a circuit board, right? And that, I feel like in that context, makes a lot of sense, because all the microchips, they are miniaturized. And
yes. So Anita Goel is a leading scientist in the field of biology and physics, as it were, and she's done lots of research in she started at Stanford, went to MIT and Harvard, so she's at the very, very top of the academic excellence, really. Let me show you some clip of her, and then you can see. So this is a talk that she did.
Here you see a picture of the Deep South in the early 1970s. This is where I grew up and spent a lot of time meditating in nature. And one of the things that struck me as a child is the underlying unity in nature. And I just became convinced that there has to be this deep underlying unifying framework in nature. And then on one hand, I love physics and mathematics. On the other hand, I was exposed to the problems of biology and medicine. And the deeper I went into the study of both, first at Stanford, Harvard, MIT, and all such nice places, the more aware I became of just how deeply disjointed our pursuits are of the physical sciences and the life sciences, and became even that much more convinced that we have to bring these together at a fundamental, new, unified way. And I was happy to see that at the end of his life, Albert Einstein came to a similar conclusion. So it turns out that most of our modern physics was developed in the context of inanimate matter. It really didn't come to terms with life, living systems, and most of our medicine today is practiced at the level of chemistry and molecular biology. It doesn't really deal with how physics, things like mechanical forces, electromagnetic fields play a role in physiological processes. And 100 years ago, somewhere near here, not too far from Berlin, Albert Einstein gave us a framework in modern physics that put matter and energy on some sort of equal footing. And I came to the conclusion that in order for the mathematical machinery of physics to come to terms with life and living systems, we're going to need an equally, if not more profound transformation in modern physics, where we put matter, energy, and this thing called information on some sort of equivalent footing. It turns out that living systems are fundamentally open systems. They exchange matter, energy, and information continuously with their environment. So 20 years ago, I fell in love with this thing. These are little nano machines that read and write information in DNA. And it turns out these little molecular Xerox machines process information embedded in their environment to modulate how they read and write the information stored in DNA. And my lab over the past several years has developed advanced capabilities to probe and precision control these nanomotors as they read and write DNA at the single molecule level. And it turns out that this provides an experimental laboratory for us to study in real time the exchange of matter, energy, and information, at least on the nanoscale. We have all.
So we'll stop it there. So I'm sure you were extremely fascinated by that. So Chris, so now, having seen what you just saw, can you describe probing a single molecular dynamics of the DNA polymerase motion?
I'm even more confused than what I was to begin with.
let me try and summarize it. So what she's just shown was a DNA enzyme, and she's basically shown a scanner. And she's done some research where if you stretch this enzyme, the scanner will start going really slower. Yeah, so you stretch it more and more, then it stops, and then you stretch it even more, then it goes in reverse. And so, what lots of research she's been doing in this field, and she's starting her own company, and she's basically able to read DNA and also to write DNA. So if you think about what that means, DNA is like you know, that's the information that defines everything about us, and you know, it's in the nucleus of all of our cells. So in the application of her research, so you might have a drop of blood, and you know, in Africa, for us, for example, if we were to try and get a test for HIV or something like that, it might take you know, ages for the conventional scanners to tell us the results. But here she's saying she's developed a link between physics and biology such that she can read the DNA through her mobile device with the drop of blood or saliva, and then tell you everything about you, basically, just from that instantaneous reading. And similarly, she can also write DNA. So you can now imagine the implications of this is very, very profound. And this is now where I think the link is for the Awake film and for us in meditation. So you can see that she started off the talk where she was saying she used to do a lot of meditation and she used to contemplate these problems in her head. And you know, if it's possible for this to happen with these devices, then clearly if we are, you know, we generate our own, we can do this ourselves through our own practices. We can change everything about us. We can, you know, if we're really perceptive, we can really go within and read everything that this body has, all the memory that we have had in the past, all that kind of stuff. Mike?
Absolutely fantastic that she, you have to imagine she's a physicist, right? She's into probably Newtonian physics, quantum mechanics. And then she said she had a little look into biology, and it kind of fascinated her that biology has such complex systems, and we have those two sciences that are on the same scale. They're both like, we look at them under the microscope, and somehow we haven't married up the two into one. And this is like when you read, now I'm gonna reference the yogas for a change, because Sri Yukteswar, he says one of the things that we will discover in Dwapara Yuga is the plant kingdom. And I'm sure we will go in there and we will discover that, of course, we know plants are alive, and we will see how incredibly complex plants are. I feel like it's more complex than we imagine it is. And I feel like oftentimes in the physics world, we go like, oh, we built this incredibly complex computer. And then 20 years later, we figure out that plants work in a similar way, but only better, right? So I feel like a lot of things we find out, life is already technology that is more advanced than the technology we produce right now. And learning from it is the right approach, rather than saying we know how it works. And I feel like the idea of having like a little robot that alters our DNA is like a way to play to add the DNA to our toolbox, basically, because I feel like those kind of things are so powerful in healing our bodies. I mean, of course, I would be the first one to say the way to heal your body is a strict diet. It's like eating the right things, meditating and everything. But I'm sure there is still room for other kinds of medicine if you have some kind of disorder. And I feel like our DNA is going to be one way that will show us how to heal diseases that we cannot heal right now.
I think most of the medicines come from plants. Well, the majority come derived from there already, right? And there's a lot of plants undiscovered in the Amazon rainforest and things. And then, I think to your point, something just popped into my mind. I suppose, all this lack of investment in discovering, more realities behind, let's say, plants and yoga and meditation. It's really because the priorities aren't there, in my opinion, and maybe the technology at the moment isn't there as well. But when we shift priorities to one of dominance, and technologies tends to be driven through the military, and then it trickles down from there, like laser technologies and and that's a sad reality that we live in, and we've lived through for millennia. But as our priorities change, going through the yogis and looking for more love and understanding and building rather than destroying and separations, then I think we will hopefully switch towards that way, and start to unlock these secrets. But this is obviously a great step towards it, and goes beyond my puny mind right now. But I liked how she had a picture of Einstein in the background there as well.
Yeah.
I got one more controversial thing to add to that.
Go for it. Yep, go for it.
I really liked. She said in one of her slides in the same talk, she said that our medicine today is largely based on chemistry, and I feel like this is because we have this capitalist system that wants to put money into researching a cure, but it has to be a cure that you can sell. Like, it cannot be fasting, because fasting is not something you can sell. It has to be a pill that you give to someone, and that heals somebody. And this is something we need to get away from. I feel like our investment in medicine is actually very high, but we invest in the wrong things. We don't invest into what are the effects of diet, what are the effects of maybe, like she says, electromagnetic fields on our body. We keep looking for new compounds, chemical compounds that we can put into a pill, swallow, and heal ourselves. This is basically our one-dimensional medicine, and I feel like this is something that will need to change. Boom.
The one thing that I wanted to can you guys hear me? Yeah. One thing that I wanted to add was that, in yoga, this is obviously very much possible, and we read numerous instances of it in the autobiography of a yogi, this kind of thing. But just because it's possible for yogis, we obviously therefore know that they're doing something with a science, aren't they? So now we see the scientists actually coming up with a way to do it through developing the intellectual method of forcefully or mechanically doing it, something that you would do intuitively if that was within your capability as a yogi. Now science is now actually doing it through the crude or the gross way, and obviously this way may take billions of pounds worth of research and hundreds and hundreds of years worth of collective knowledge, where the yogi may realize how to do this within a second of his of thought or practice, or coming to him.
I couldn't agree more, Frank. And people see science as a religion and almost like a teacher in a sense, but life is the teacher. Life should be the religion. If anything, life is I don't need science to tell me how to breathe or walk or do anything that I do. I just do these things because we're gifted through having life. And yogis to me just connect with that life and sit with that life and look at that life. But yeah, I mean, science is the intellectual knife, isn't it? Just dissecting everything up and, to kind of go down that road. It's endless, right? And to what end? So it's fine. It's bringing us great comfort. So I'm sitting in a nice chair made by different materials, all through technology and science. Speaking to you through a laptop and everything, but yeah, we need to get the balance right, I suppose.
Absolutely. Yeah. So let's move on to the next scene. Then we have a certain Brother Chidananda, and the certain Brother Chidananda, before we talk about him, let's talk about what he says. So he says something linked to what we were just talking about. Yogananda's teachings he was really saying, can only be received now in this present day and age, in this dawn of science, where we're talking about molecules and atoms and everything is energy, and everything is that is everything is kind of encapsulated in that statement. So the lexicon, the terminology that Yogananda used to use wouldn't have perhaps worked 200 years ago, because humanity wasn't here in our state of intellectual understanding and appreciation and aspirations, really. Does that resonate with you guys, Chris?
Yeah, it does, and I love the imagery that they used in at the end of this minute, where it was I think a man standing maybe on top of a building with this some dramatic sky and clouds overhead, and it dissolves into a million trillion different particles, and I think it really captures that what Brother Chidananda was saying. I think this is more common in the Hindu scriptures and teachings, that this idea that we are all one and part of the same being, essentially. It's a derivative of that, isn't it? And we're coming to understand it in a scientific term now that science is caught up with that kind of speech. I remember my fiance's dad talking about the subatomic particles, and he was really energized, saying, well, what is really between us, and what actually separates us? Nothing. I think it's, once we kind of see that for what it is, it's such a liberating concept and idea to think that we are all one part of one being in this gross material world, in that sense, manifested in seemingly different bodies and all sorts. We all exist in this reality. So yeah, for this to be used in the Awake documentary in the way that it has done is going to open up so many people's minds to this more fluffy kind of concepts of everything's love, man, everything's one. New agey kind of stuff. It really grounds the idea into being for me.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you have to imagine the predominant mainstream religion in the West is Christianity, and Christ came in the lowest, not the lowest part, maybe 500 years away from the lowest part of the Kali Yuga. And to be frank, he had a really hard time describing what was going on in the body at this time, right? It was like the minds of people, they must have been very materialistic, as is normal in this age. And then you are trying to explain to them the same message that Yogananda brought, God is in the spine, right? But now you trying to say it, they probably didn't even know what a spine was, right? They didn't have a lot of knowledge about biology at this time, I'm guessing. And then you just have to say it in metaphors. You go then on and say, like in Revelations, St. John talks about the 7 churches and the 7 locks, and I think talking about chakras would have blown people's minds. It would have gone like, what is this witchcraft, right? So it was a different time. And then now we are in this age of energy, and now we have in the West this Christianity that is full of those metaphors that we don't understand. And so I feel like that was one of the reasons why it was so necessary that someone like Yogananda comes and sets the record straight, explains to us what Christ meant back then, and also brings his own teachings. That kind of makes sense to us, and the kind of a teaching of the age of energy.
Yeah, I'd like to expand on what you just said, Mike. So we think about the most primitive of 10 commandments. Let's say Old Testament. We say one of the commandments is thou shalt not kill, and then Christ made that slightly more deeper, and he said, treat thy neighbor, as thyself. And that was then. And that now we're coming to a stage where people are accepting actually thy neighbor is thyself. So you would treat him as yourself because he is yourself, and there's no way you would kill him. So that kind of it kind of shows you the state of consciousness that was needed or the teachings that were needed for that state of consciousness that was back then, that had 10 commandments, to what it is now, where we can appreciate that, you are, Ramana Maharishi, someone asked him, how shall I treat others? And then Ramana Maharishi said, which others? So, there are no others, you are the others that you think that your illusion is telling you. It's just an illusion. They are yourself.
And it's testament to, and pardon the pun, to those teachings back, in the Old and New Testaments, as to how well they've lasted and how well they've done. They've really spread, around the world as teachings, and really taken hold. And even though people might not really understand them, they still hold on to them as truths. They still, talk about them in the ways that they can understand them for that time. And it's lasted many, many, many hundreds of years. I mean, that's, this is really significant, that there's something beyond these words that they speak that they know is true, but they can't conceptualize it yet. And that's a real testament to Jesus and others that have come before him. And I think, with Yogananda, what he said, and we've said it times before, that it will stand the test of time, and will be breakthroughs. That people will look to Yogananda as really somebody who came and broke new ground in the Western world. So yeah, next 2,000 years, let's see.
Something that we glossed over, that Anita Goel said, was that concept of this physical consciousness and the play of that divine consciousness, or we call it Christ in Yogananda's terminology, we call it Christ consciousness, and then beyond that is the cosmic consciousness. And this play where there's a play between the two, and there's a medium where they kind of interact, and one becomes the other, etc. That's something that we're really taught a lot about in detail in Yogananda's writings, and we obviously, part of our sadhana is to experience that, that Christ consciousness within us, and that cosmic consciousness that is beyond all creation. And that's pretty much what science is also trying to do, but again, in the crudest way possible. Whereas we're doing it at not we, the yogi does it at the most intuitive and the quickest way possible, without necessarily needing to dot all the I's and cross all the T's. But that play of consciousness from one to the other two, I just wanted you guys to feed back on that that line that Anita said. Do either of you have any comments? Yeah, go on, Mike.
Yeah, I find it amazing that someone who's a physicist talks about cosmic consciousness, because that's where we need to end up being. This is kind of the scenario we want to be in, because I don't think this is currently happened or happening, that someone who is going regularly into Christ consciousness has like electrodes on his head or something, and you can measure what it does to his body. But once we understand on a physiological level what it does to us, I feel like then our science will figure out that this is actually the goal. for us. This is where we want to go, and not just some people. This is where we all should be heading. And it would turn science, medicine, all our fields of research into focusing on that one goal. How do we quicken our way to cosmic consciousness? Because, and once we are there, we have this civilization that worships God and tries to help everyone achieve experiencing Him. I feel like this is, I'm not sure if this is too high of a utopia goal, but I feel like this, if we were there, then we would be in this age where we're in, but we would be going in the right direction. I feel like this would be a fantastic scenario.
Mm-hmm. I think, yeah, the cyberpunk reality is probably closer to us right now. But I agree with you. Yeah, if all attention was put on that, it would be probably a few thousand years away from that. Really. But yeah, it's going to be a lot more niche, I think, until then, right? And you know, just to go back to, you know, Krishna's followers and Jesus's followers, he had 12 followers. You know, it wasn't like he was commanding, you know, vast swathes of the population at the time. Even for the gravitas that he would have had. You know, still people were very skeptical. They didn't want to go against, you know, their ruling kind of class at the time. And it's similar now. You know, I don't think it's all that much different when you have somebody like Yogananda, for instance, coming with such revelations. In my opinion, people, for their own reason, will get stuck in their dogma and Maya. So yeah, cycles of life. But yeah, I think what's been said here in the Awake documentary is really nice to see. And I think they hit the nail on the head with this minute for me, trying to ground the information. Trying to bring it into this century, because so much has changed in the last 100 years. You know, what Yogananda has said 100 years ago is playing out to be true. And so I think they did a really good job bringing somebody in with a stature that we're seeing, you know, from Harvard University. They've got the names, they've got all the names in there. So it's fantastic, fantastic job on their part, on the director's part.
Excellent. So we can now talk about Brother Chidananda, who, of course, is the president of Self-Realization Fellowship and Yogoda Satsanga Society in India. So he's the head of our lovely organization. But Mike, can you tell us some more about him?
Yeah, let me read a text about him. I'm going to read the first paragraph and then we can talk about it a little bit. It goes, born in 1953 in Annapolis, Maryland, Brother Chidananda first encountered the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda and his Self-Realization Fellowship in Encinitas in the early 1970s, when he was a student of sociology and philosophy at the University of California, San Diego. Drawn by a long-felt interest in India's spirituality, he visited the SRF Ashram Center in Encinitas, just north of the university campus, which was a familiar landmark for many of the students living in the adjacent coastal communities. Such a good scenario, right? Yeah, like you're interested in spirituality and your university happens to be right next to Encinitas Ashram and the Hermitage. And yeah, I guess that's how Master places people sometimes, right? He goes like, you're gonna be president of SRF one day, so I'll put you in this university right next to Encinitas. And then also it's been the 1970s, which I guess was a different time there. It was a much smaller organization, and I feel like the pressure on people wasn't as high as it is today, where the pressure for money, for performance, for paying rent, for getting a good job. I feel like, and then he was studying sociology and philosophy. That is like something that someone would study if he cares about human beings. And then he was also interested in spirituality. So I feel like it's a story that really kind of Master already placed him in the right place in the beginning.
Yeah. So I think Brother Nandamoy says in one of his talks is many of us, or each of us, are handpicked by the Guru to especially to do important work such as lead the organization of Self-Realization Fellowship, because he wasn't at the he wasn't when they were filming this film. He wasn't the president back then. He was just one of the members of the board of directors. Right. And yeah, on that concept of hand-picked, they also read one of Brother Chidananda in the recent Guru Purnima talk from YSS. He was saying that Sri Daya Mata and Sri Mridini Mata, the second and third president of Self-Realization Fellowship, so Guruji took them from the astral, took their souls from the astral plane and said, okay, I need you for this incarnation. You'll come with me and you'll find me, and then we'll do some stuff together. And in that process also, you'll no doubt relinquish some of the last vestiges of karma that you may or may not have. Some of that he didn't say, but I'm filling in the gap, filling in the gaps in my own limited understanding.
You know, I didn't know this before, but I googled Brother Chidananda, and I saw a really lovely definition here on Wikipedia. Chidananda means bliss through the infinite divine consciousness. Yeah, didn't know that. That's lovely. And really, when you listen to his voice is so soothing, and I guess so deep. You know, there's something great about his voice. I'm always attracted to when I hear it. And of course, I think we all were there when I came to visit the London Centre, and that was awesome to see him there. And very tall figure, isn't he? And just great stature and presence about him. It was packed that day, wasn't it?
I remember Priyanka and I were holding the doors, so like she was on that side and we both opened the doors as like two twin devotees. It was very nice with similar names. But going back to your point about Chidananda, so that derives from, in the last podcast we talked about the concept of God as Sat Chit Ananda, and the word Chit in Sandhi what becomes Chidananda. So that is the same word. So ever existing, ever conscious, ever new bliss consciousness is in that name, and it's certainly a very apt name for Brother Chidananda, isn't it? Yes, go on, Mike.
Sure.
Yeah, I guess his name kind of turned into his mission as well, right? So you have someone called Chidananda, and then boom, he becomes president of SRF. And I'm not sure if this is official policy or something, but I think Guruji said at some point that someone who is president of SRF will always be in cosmic consciousness or close to it. Don't quote me on that. That's super informal information, but I
recall something along those lines.
Yeah. So there we go.
You got second and third paragraph potentially.
Should I go?
Yeah, do your second one perhaps.
So I ended on that he visited the ashram in Encinitas, and then some months later he happened upon a copy of the autobiography of a yogi, and was instantly captivated by the great wisdom and divine consciousness that spoke from its pages. During his last year at the university, he enrolled for the SRF lessons and began entering SRF services in Encinitas. He was deeply inspired by the talks of Brother Anandamoy, who was the minister there at the time, and also benefited from Brother Anandamoy's personal counsel. It was in this sacred environment, so permeated with the vibrations of Paramahansaji, that he was profoundly influenced by the monks and nuns living there, and the desire to devote his life completely to seeking God and serve the work of Paramahansa Yogananda as a monastic disciple was awakened almost immediately. Fantastic.
Superb.
So, yeah, those were the days, right, when you were in Encinitas and you had Brother Nandamoy as a minister and you could get personal counsel from him. And I can see, and it says so permeated with vibrations of Paramahansaji. that was also a different time, right? In the 70s, Yogananda left his body in the 50s, right? It wasn't that long ago. It was like 20 years ago. So I feel like he had this perfect environment there to be drawn into SRF, and then also developing the wish to become a monk.
Yeah, agreed.
Getting attacked by my stray cat.
Finally starting to behave like a stray. Or either that was it's very interested in our discussion with Brother Chidananda. Perhaps we have another name for the cat. It doesn't want that name that you previously gave it. No, or Chid, or perhaps Ananda.
I listening to you, Mike. I'd love to hear how Brother Chidananda happened to come across the autobiography of a yogi. There's these little stories are just, very interesting. I find that they just land in somebody's lap. But awesome. That he just took to it straight away.
Yeah, I heard the story once where someone was in a library trying to get a book, and then another book fell on his head, and it was the autobiography of a yogi. So those are the perfect stories when I hear them.
I think Brahmajari Jason or someone said that. Yeah. But yeah, that's a really good point. And I think Mike, you previously made this point. Like Brother Chidananda is also very in touch with the modern trends. Like he, for example, started the whole online meditation center like pretty much 1 year before, and the online lessons pretty much 1 year before the pandemic, and then look how much the world has made use of those things. So his leadership has been different because Sri Daya Mata and Sri Murlini Mata were, I wouldn't say old-fashioned, but certainly they were later on in their years, so they came with they were direct disciples, so you can imagine the weight of experience and pressure that they would have to lead the organization. And Brother Chidananda had a pretty more of a blank canvas, didn't he? And that's why he can do some of these innovative things, and Self-Relation Fellowship has changed so much under his tutelage over the last 3 or 4 years, hasn't it?
Yeah, he definitely made everything being available online a priority when he became president. And it was, like you said, the timing was perfect. The timing, I mean, that is the kind of timing that you
cosmic timing, you might say.
Yeah, I mean, fantastic. I mean, imagine we were in the pandemic and nothing would be online, then, because those things take time, right? Like people sometimes think, oh yeah, they do it online and it was also easy. I'm sure there's so many lay disciples who put so much work into this. Took at least a year to put everything together. Like from experience of serving SRF in different capacities, I know when they do something, they always do it right and perfect, and they organize everything and this is like, if we wouldn't have had this during the pandemic, it would have probably taken a year to set it up, and we could have ended up with like no convocation at all instead of having this fantastic online convocation that we had instead.
Yep. I think that pretty much wraps up the minute. So very scientific focus. I enjoyed it. Any last remarks from you, Chris?
I think Prank, you had captured the quote that was the Einstein quote.
Yes.
I don't know if did you share that? Did I miss
No,
it?
she did it. I thought she might talk about it in her speech, but yes, the Einstein quote is, "One can best appreciate from a study of living things how primitive physics still is." So yeah, Anita Goel really talked about this, the limitations of each branch of science. Profound.
I feel like that sums up the minute perfectly.
On that note, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Jai Guru.
Jai Guru, everyone.